Hi, my name is Angel. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to my May wrap up. This was a much slower month for me in terms of reading, but with that being said, I still read 17 books, so clearly it wasn't all that bad. I had 2 5-stars, I had a 4.5 star, and then majority of the rest of those were 4 stars. So overall, it was a pretty good reading month. As always, we'll be starting with my lowest rated books and making our way up to those highest 5 stars. So unfortunately, I did have a 1-star book this month, and I guess that makes it my worst book of the year so far, because previously I had a 1.5-star book, but this is my first 1 star, and I'm really sad because it's a very anticipated release for me. That book is The House That Horror Built by Christina Henry, which I actually did enjoy at first, and then after a while it just started to drag. I read this in my most recent reading vlog if you guys want to go check that out and see my thought process as I'm reading it. I also included a little bit of a spoiler section in there so I could explain myself and why I thought this book was so ridiculous. But essentially, you spend 300 pages doing the same thing, nothing really happens, and then the last 20 pages, everything gets explained, and then the book ends. And it just wasn't for me because I felt like nothing really happened. I enjoyed some of the characters and their relationships to each other, but beyond that, it was truly, in my opinion, it felt like a waste of time. Moving on to 2 stars, I had 2 2-star books, and the first one is The Woods Are Waiting by Katherine Green. This is a thriller book, and we are following this woman whose childhood, town where she grew up, it's just kind of been a thing throughout history where 3 children randomly go missing every once in a while. It always happens in threes, and it's always children. And they kind of have this local legend of the Hickory Man, who is this entity that lives in the woods and takes these children. So they have these kind of nursery rhymes. They have different superstitions that everybody in the town kind of does in order to avoid the Hickory Man or have their children avoid the Hickory Man. But she got out of that town as soon as she could, but now she gets a call to come back from the sheriff because another child has gone missing. Her mother still lives there and is dealing with a lot of mental health issues, and she's just kind of lost it after this last child went missing. So she goes back to help take care of her mother through this, and then the strange disappearances are happening again, and she starts trying to solve the mystery. This was 2 stars because nothing happened for 60% of the book, and then what did happen up until then was very, very repetitive. We kind of kept getting spoon-fed the same things over and over and over again. It was boring, it was slow, and I just didn't like the conclusion of it. I wish the Hickory Man was real. I wish this was a supernatural thriller because of how boring it was. My next 2-star book was The Family Remains by Lisa Jewell. I read The Family Upstairs last month and gave it 4 stars, so of course I decided to pick up the sequel. I've heard people say that I guess this is advertised you can read it as a standalone. I don't really agree with that, and I also think this book was just entirely unnecessary. I don't think a sequel was really needed. It didn't really seem to add anything to the story. We also had this added storyline of Rachel, but her storyline was pretty much entirely useless because it was just there as filler basically, and to reiterate something that we already knew from the first book. So I don't want to necessarily spoil anything if you haven't read the first one, but I just didn't see the point in having that storyline in there. It really just read a bunch of filler between chapters so that she could make this book longer, and overall, just an unneeded sequel. Moving on to 3 stars, I had 1 3-star book, and it was Night Watching by Tracy Sierra. This is a new release. I believe it's a debut. I've seen a lot of people reading it and a lot of people talking about it. You guys have probably heard of it before, but this is a suspense thriller where we start off, we get right into the action. We have this woman that is home alone with her 2 young children, and an intruder comes into the house, and she has to do her best to protect protect her children and hide her children away from this man and find a way to get help and get them out of this situation. So the first half was very, very tense, very, very suspenseful as we were following this woman trying to protect her children, and I really, really enjoyed it. But then it moves on to something else. I didn't realize, I kind of thought that this was going to be a book where like the whole thing is about that incident, but we do get to follow her and her family after they make it out of this situation. There was a lot of commentary about, you know, the way that women are treated, especially when it comes to things like this, and are disbelieved a lot of the time. And the shitty police work in this book will make you angry. It had me like so enraged at times with just how ridiculous the cops were in their investigation, but that is the point, and that does happen in real life, and it's really upsetting and very, like I said, it makes you angry to read. I like the writing. I would definitely read more from Tracy Sierra in the future. This book is one that will definitely try to like lead you down different paths and make you believe different things and make you disbelieve the main character, as does everybody else in the book. But for me, I feel like it was kind of easy to figure out what the truth was before it was revealed. Like, as it was happening, I was like, okay, so this happened, and this happened, and this happened. But the author tries to mislead you purposely, and then it comes back, and everything that I was like, oh, that happened, that happened, that happened, it was all revealed. So I think it was kind of like easy to figure out that she was misleading you and what the truth was. But overall, I enjoyed it. I actually gave this 3.5 stars instead of 3 stars, so disregard me because I didn't have any 3 stars, but I had 3.5 star books. My next 3.5 star book was an ARC, and this book comes out this month, and that is The Eyes Are the Best Part by Monica Kim. I'm sure you guys have seen this book everywhere. I think it's definitely going to be like that thriller of the summer. Everybody's been saying that, and I definitely agree after having read it. Like, people are gonna eat this up. Quite literally, eat this up. So this book is also in my most recent reading vlog if you guys want to see my full thoughts as I was reading it. But we are following Ji-won and her family in this book. So we start off meeting our main character. Her father has just left her family. She is a freshman at college, and she is just kind of struggling with all the changes that life has to throw at her. Her mother gets a new boyfriend who is kind of a piece of shit, and her sister kind of have to navigate this and try not to disrupt things further, and all of the stress and the changes of her life leads her to start eating eyeballs. It was very interesting, very fun. There were some violent parts, but I wish that they were more violent parts. I think the characters had a lot of depth. There was a lot to be said about trauma throughout this family and how each of the women deal with that and all of the different things and the ways that it affects them. There was some social commentary in here as well. The first 80% of the book I think was very slow, but the pacing was nice. Like, it was slow, but like well paced. And then we get to the very end and it just kind of felt a little bit rushed after that nice slow pacing. I also feel like because the end was so rushed, there are some plot holes or different things that maybe didn't quite get tied up and answered like I wish they would have. But overall, I did enjoy this book. I could see a lot of people enjoying it. So if you have it on your radar for this summer, definitely don't miss out. Pick it up and see what you think of it. My other 3.5 star book was The Skin Was Once Mine and Other Disturbances by Eric LaRocca, who is one of my favorite authors. I absolutely love everything that they write. I will eat it up. I love to see inside of Eric LaRocca's brain because there are some messed up things in there, and I love it. So this was a short story collection. We have 4 different stories. 2 of them I gave 4 stars, and then 2 of them I gave 3 stars. Hence the 3.5 star rating. So my 2 4 stars from this collection were the title story, The Skin Was Once Mine, and then I have to look at the title on here. The other one I really enjoyed was All the Parts of You That Won't Easily Burn. That is the story that is going to stay with me. What is it with Eric LaRocca and writing about like burning things? Because the other short story collection by them, The Trees Grew Because I Bled There, they had a story in there called Bodies Are for Burning or something, and that story has stuck with me since I read it like over a year ago, and now it's going to be All the Parts of You That Won't Easily Burn. It's going to stay in my brain forever because it was fucked up. Also, that book is in my most recent reading vlog as well. Moving on to my large list of 4 stars, which is not a bad thing. I'm not complaining. I really had a 4-star streak in May and I'm here for it. So let's get these 3 out of the way. I read these 3 in my eco horror reading vlog, so if you guys haven't seen it, go and check it out. But we had The Ruins by Scott Smith, Eden by Tim Levin, and The New Wilderness by Diane Cook, which were all 4 stars from that video. The Ruins is a classic. We all know it. There were some times in that book where it was very obviously written by a man, and that wasn't my favorite, but I love the story. I've seen the movie a million times, so I knew I was going to love it. It is gory, it is brutal, it doesn't hold back. Like, it is so bleak and depraved, but in all of the best ways. Eden by Tim Levin is another eco horror, obviously, but it is more survivalist, kind of action-y. We have this group of people that is in a virgin zone, which is a zone that has been sectioned off to give back to the wilderness because of the destruction that humans have caused to the planet. So no humans are allowed to go into these zones, but we do have like a kind of community of explorers and adventurers whose pretty much entire life goal is to get into these zones and travel across it from one end to the other. So we have this group of people that is doing that in the zone that is named Eden, and they find some crazy things in there that have been mutated by nature taking itself back. I thought it was fun. I liked the group dynamics. I liked the setting of it. I think Tim Levin did a great job with that. And then The New Wilderness by Diane Cook, I wouldn't really say is horror, but it's more like kind of ecological dystopian. We have this group of people that have been selected to live in the wilderness state, which is basically this experiment that is run by some organization. Don't know what they're trying to measure here, but they take these 20 people and they put them out into the wilderness and they say, okay, like, go do your thing. They can bring whatever they want, but they are not allowed to leave any trash behind. They are not allowed to like set up camp or like build permanent structures or stay in a place for an extended amount of time. So they're basically just like nomads that their entire goal is to just wander through this wilderness. I think there definitely were some inconsistencies that other reviewers have pointed out, and it's one of those things where it's like you read a book and you're like, wow, this is really good, I really like this, and then you read another review and somebody's like, well, this was bad because this and this and this and this, and you're like, oh, they do make some points here. So I will say, make your own opinion of this book if you decide to read it. I enjoyed it. I really liked the setting of it. I liked the characters. It was just a fun experience, and I was thoroughly immersed the whole time that I was reading it, so that's why I'm giving it 4 stars. The world could have been a little bit better fleshed out. Like I said, there are some inconsistencies that other people have pointed out that I do agree with and do see. We're just gonna leave it at that. Okay, I guess we can talk about this one next because it's also in a reading vlog, my most recent reading vlog. Indian Burial Ground by Nick Medina. This is the story, how do I pitch this? It's dual timeline. So we have, in the present day timeline, we have this woman whose boyfriend has just been killed, and it's kind of been viewed as a suicide, but she doesn't believe that. She doesn't believe that her boyfriend would do something like that and leave her behind in such a way. And then we also have the past timeline with that woman's uncle, and when he lived on that same reservation, and some crazy things happened there while he was a teen, and it all is kind of connected to this like native folklore and legend, and I really enjoyed it. There's a lot to be said about this book. There is a lot of commentary. We get a lot of talk about alcoholism and addiction, grief, shared trauma, suicide, and then suicide rates among Native people as well. I think Nick Medina is a very talented author, and this story was beautifully written, even though these topics are hard to deal with. They were all intentional to the story that he was telling. There was nothing that was thrown in there and wasn't, essential to the plot, and I really liked the way that he handled those topics. One thing I will say is, as far as the dual timeline or like dual perspectives, I was far more interested in the past timeline. I think that honestly on its own could have been the main story. And I kind of wish it was, because I really, really enjoyed that and the progression of it and seeing these crazy things that happened to this guy as a teen when he was living on this reservation. But I really, really liked it. Like, the horror elements were there, the writing was fantastic, the characters were so well fleshed out and their relationships to each other, and it was just a really, really great read. My next 4-star book is Westlake Soul by Rio Yours. I think that's how you pronounce the last name. This is a book that is unlike any book that I've ever read. It is out of print. I was lucky enough that my library had a copy. So if you guys are able to get your hands on this, I would highly, highly recommend. We are following this guy in his early 20s, and he was very, very big into surfing, loved to surf, loved to be on the beach, and one day he has a surfing accident and he is essentially, what do they call it? Like a permanent vegetized state? Yes, permanent vegetative state is basically what he's in. So he doesn't have any control over his body. He cannot move even the smallest thing on his body, but he is still there in his mind. And it is so fascinating to read from his perspective. But there's also kind of like a fantasy element to it, where with this accident he has gotten this superpower and he can kind of like just travel. Like, he can leave his body and travel with his mind to other places. He can access like other people's minds. He can talk to his dog through his mind. So it's very interesting. There's a lot of like fun elements to it. And then obviously, like, we're reading from this very young, like 20-something-year-old guy. So he's just got his own sense of humor that is there throughout the writing, but it deals with such like a heavy topic that it's like, it's very powerful and a very, very impactful book. A lot of people love it. I don't think I've ever seen any bad reviews for this book. It's just fascinating and unique and very thought-provoking and an experience like no other. So if you are able to read this, I would highly recommend, and try to go in like knowing as little as possible and just let the book take you away, because it will. My next 4-star was Shark Heart by Emily Haybeck, which is essentially a love story, but it is about, it takes place in this world where it's just like a common thing, not a common thing, but it's like not a, I guess it, what is the word I'm looking for? Like a normal thing in this world, that sometimes people will get these mutations that cause them to turn into different animals. Some animals are more dangerous than others, and the mutation kind of affects different ways depending on the animal you're in. So this guy, he gets his mutation and he's going to turn into a great white shark. And that is one of the most dangerous because it is very, very quick acting. And then obviously turning into a shark is going to be pretty dangerous. But I thought that was really just a fascinating element because it's like just a normal thing in this world. So they have like all these kind of medical interventions and medical facilities for these different mutations, which I thought was really, really interesting. But this story is told through different perspectives. So our first perspective, like I said, we are following this couple where the man is turning into a great white shark. And I thought that was the whole story because that's how people always pitch it. But then you get other perspectives after that, and they are relating to this man and his story, but we also get to see some other stories as well. I think all of the different perspectives were equally intriguing, and I loved every single one of them. The book was absolutely beautifully written. It is so captivating and so immersive, so thought-provoking, and I had a great time with this one. Then I read Floating Hotel by Grace Curtis, which I read in my sci-fi reading vlog. This is kind of like a cozy space sci-fi where the entire book takes place on this like space hotel. So it's basically just a ship that is a hotel, and it travels all over the place, picks up people, drops people off, and we are following each chapter is from a different perspective of somebody and how they relate to this hotel. But we also have some mysteries going on throughout the plot, and overall it was very fun. Like, I loved the atmosphere. I loved being in this like space hotel. I think it was so carefully crafted and just immersive, and I really enjoyed it. I also liked all of the characters and their stories and the way that everything relates back to this hotel. I liked the way the ending wrapped up, and overall I didn't really have any complaints with this one. My next 4-star was another arc that comes out this month, and that is The Next Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. So this is a follow-up to the very famous thriller The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine. So I don't want to get too far into this book. If you haven't read the first one, do it, because what are you doing? So this story picks right back up with Amber and Daphne after the events of the first book. We also get a new fun perspective and a new fun character in here, and it just gets crazy. It's a little bit slow to start, but once it picks up, like, it does not let down till the very end. Liv Constantine is freaking fantastic at writing like just the most ridiculous rich people drama, and I really enjoyed it. The characters made some really stupid decisions at times, but it was thoroughly entertaining. There were things that happened that I was not expecting to happen, and I had a great time. Moving on to my 4.5-star book. That book is Devolution by Max Brooks, which I also read in my eco horror reading vlog. This I was apprehensive about because it is a Sasquatch horror book, and I wasn't sure how I was going to feel about it, but now I know that this book made me scared of Bigfoot. Like, genuinely, this book had me spooked at times. Basically, the premise of the story is that there was, this eruption of Mount Rainier, and that kind of overshadowed this smaller event that happened at a very small community living in the mountains, where pretty much everybody was killed by Sasquatch. So we are reading the story through the journal entries of a woman that was involved in this incident. Along with those journal entries, we get like different interview, like podcasts, forum post kind of snippets, because the whole idea is that this man has found these journal entries and he wants to bring more attention to this case because it got overshadowed by everything else that happened with Mount Rainier. But the tension is there, the atmosphere is there. Like, Max Brooks does a great job of creating the atmosphere in this book, and it was so spooky at times. Like, it genuinely had me freaked out, because I don't like not human things coming from the woods. Like, that is one thing that always freaks me out in books, so I love this for that reason. Also, because of the format, it is extremely easy to read, and I would highly recommend it. Moving on to my 2 5-stars of the month. Let's start with the more obvious one, Horror Movie by Paul Tremblay, which is an arc. Once again, comes out in June. Please pick it up when it comes out, because this book was freaking fantastic. So this story is about this movie, this screenplay that was written back in the 90s, and the movie was called Horror Movie. And we are following this man who played the Thin Kid. That's all he's ever known by in the book, is the Thin Kid. So he was playing the Thin Kid in this movie. Something happened while they were filming, and they never actually got to, release the movie. But since then, there have been 3 separate scenes released from the movie, like uploaded on YouTube, and some other information leaked. So now we have a lot of people that are wanting to make a reboot of it. So we are following this guy, the Thin Kid, in the future, as he is associated with the reboot and asked to kind of come on and like help out with the reboot. First of all, the screenplay was genuinely so creepy. Like, this is a book that will haunt you. It was a book where when I was reading it, it was the last thing I thought about when I went to bed and the first thing I thought about when I woke up, because I was having such a fantastic time with this. Paul Tremblay creates like some horrifying imagery within this story, and then we also it's almost like a descent into madness as we are following this man, the thin kid, and the way that he gets wrapped up in this role that he's playing. I don't want to give too much information away, but just know that I love it so much. It'll probably be one of my top books from the year, and please pick it up when it comes out this month. And last but not least, my second 5-star of May was a romance, which is very, very rare for me. This is my second 5-star romance this year, which once again is very, very rare. But that book is This Summer Will Be Different by Carley Fortune. I was going back and forth at first of wanting to rate it 4.5 stars or wanting to rate it 5 stars, but I was like, fuck it. Like, I loved this book and I couldn't stop thinking about it, and that made it 5 stars. I'm still thinking about it. Like, I'm still riding the high from this book. It's been a couple of weeks and I'm like, I want something to make me feel that way again. So in this book, we are following Lucy. Her best friend is Bridget, and Bridget is from Prince Edward Island. So Lucy knows that Bridget has a brother, but at the beginning of their friendship, like, she hadn't met the brother yet, and the two of them make plans to travel to this island together, but Bridget gets stuck and she can't make it till the next day. So Lucy is there by herself and she meets this guy named Felix, and they kind of go back and spend the night together, and then she finds out the next day that Felix is Bridget's brother. And ever since then, she usually makes like a yearly trip to Prince Edward Island, and they keep trying to avoid each other, but they keep coming back and having relations with one another while Lucy is visiting the island. So obviously in this book, we get flashbacks to the different summers or the different times that they've spent time together, but we also have the present day timeline in which Bridget is getting ready to get married, and like a week before her wedding, she drops everything, flees to the island, and asks Lucy, like begs Lucy to come and be there with her. So Lucy drops everything for her best friend and goes to the island, and she's really trying to focus on Bridget, obviously, because something's going on for her to just flee a week before her wedding. But Felix is there as well, and it complicates things. I loved Felix so much. I also liked Lucy. I feel like her character had a lot of depth and there were a lot of deeper themes within this book. It did have like the traditional third act breakup, but it wasn't a third act breakup that I hated. Most of the time I hate when that happens in books, but I think the way that everything played out in this one like made so much sense within the characters and who they are as people and their journeys individually before they come together, and I really enjoyed it. Also, Carley Fortune is just like that girl. Like, she's great at writing like summer books. Like, the beautiful like island backdrop like has me just so ready for summer and like going to the beach and just like exploring and doing different things. I think that is one thing that Carley Fortune always kills. I've read her 2 other books. One of them was literally 1 star, and then the other one I gave 4.5 stars. So now I have a 5-star from her, and I'm so excited, and I want it to be next summer so I can get another Carley Fortune book to read. Anyway, those are all 17 books that I read in May. So with that being said, that brings us to the end. Thank you guys so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you next time.